Hi, my name is Jessica, and I need to tell you about the night my mother shoved a birthday cake into my face and called me a worthless failure in front of 75 people at what was supposed to be my own birthday party. But that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was realizing that every single moment of humiliation, every missing inheritance check, every mysteriously deleted family photo, every scholarship rejection that came without explanation, none of it was an accident. It was all orchestrated by the people who were supposed to love me most. Have you ever sat quietly at your own family dinner table, only to realize you were never actually invited to belong? Have you ever wondered if your entire existence was just an inconvenience to the people who brought you into this world? Because that's exactly what I discovered on my 32nd birthday. And I'm about to tell you how I went from family scapegoat to exposing a conspiracy that would destroy everything they'd built. All because they underestimated the power of one teacher who finally found her voice. You know that sinking feeling you get when you walk into a room and immediately sense something's wrong? That gut instinct that screams danger, even when everything looks normal on the surface? That's exactly what hit me like a freight train when I pulled into the circular driveway of my childhood home in Westchester County. The massive Georgian colonial sat on 3 acres of perfectly manicured lawn, the kind of property that screams old money and established power. This was supposed to be my 32nd birthday celebration, something my family had insisted on after years of barely acknowledging the date. But the scene in front of me looked like they were hosting a congressional fundraiser, not a family birthday party. Cars lined both sides of Maple Ridge Lane, Mercedes S-Classes, BMW 7 Series, Audis, Porsches, even a few Bentleys and a Tesla Model S Plaid. The wraparound porch with its white columns was illuminated like a movie premiere, with actual string lights and what looked like professionally arranged floral displays. I could hear classical music and sophisticated laughter spilling out through the French doors, the kind of sounds that come from people who discuss their stock portfolios over champagne. But here's what made my stomach drop into my shoes. The enormous welcome banner stretched across the front entrance didn't say, "Happy Birthday, Jessica." Instead, in elegant gold calligraphy that probably cost more than my monthly rent, it read, "Celebrating our shining star, Madison Elizabeth Whitmore." My younger sister's full name. On my birthday. At my birthday party, I sat in my 10-year-old Honda Civic, watching in growing disbelief. Madison had gotten a brand new Mercedes for passing the bar exam. I'd bought my car used with my teacher's salary. The contrast couldn't have been more obvious. These weren't the usual family barbecue crowd of aunts, uncles, and neighbors. These were Madison's law school colleagues, my parents' country club friends, state senators, federal judges, basically Manhattan's power elite. Through the bay windows, I could see uniformed catering staff moving efficiently between guests, carrying silver trays of what looked like the kind of hors d'oeuvres you see at embassy parties. This wasn't a family celebration. This was a networking event for the rich and powerful, disguised as my birthday party. The irony wasn't lost on me. While I'd spent the afternoon getting ready in my tiny Queens apartment, carefully choosing a navy blue dress from Target and doing my own makeup in my bathroom mirror, they'd apparently been preparing for what looked like a society gala. I'd brought a homemade apple pie, Madison's favorite from when we were kids, thinking it would be a nice personal touch. Now I felt like I was showing up to the Met Gala with a casserole dish. When I finally worked up the courage to walk inside, the sensory overload was immediate. The scent of expensive catered food mixed with my mother Patricia's signature Tom Ford perfume and the subtle aroma of what I recognized as Dom Perignon champagne. The house, that massive 7-bedroom colonial with imported marble and crystal chandeliers, hadn't changed since I was a child. But the energy was completely different. This felt like walking into a foreign embassy where I definitely didn't have the right diplomatic credentials. Every conversation stopped mid-sentence as I entered, followed by those polite, uncomfortable smiles you give to someone who's clearly crashed the wrong party. I heard whispered conversations resume behind me. "Who is that?" "Oh, that's the other daughter." The teacher. Poor thing. Madison stood in the center of the living room under the massive baccarat crystal chandelier, wearing a stunning emerald cocktail dress that I later found out was custom-made by a designer whose name I couldn't even pronounce. She was holding court like she was accepting a Nobel Prize, gracefully nodding as a circle of admirers showered her with compliments about her recent promotion to senior associate at Cromwell. Sterling and Associates, one of Manhattan's most prestigious white shoe law firms, were just so incredibly proud of Madison. I heard Aunt Catherine gush to a group of women wearing jewelry that could fund a small country's education budget. Making senior associate at 29 with that kind of billable hour record, simply extraordinary. And the clients she's bringing in, Fortune 500 companies fighting over her services. Another voice chimed in, and the pro bono work she's doing for the Children's Defense Fund. Harvard Law Review wants to feature her article on family court reform. Such a remarkable young woman, really making a difference in the world. I felt that familiar ache start to build in my chest, the one I'd been carrying since childhood, the one that came from always being the other daughter, the one who chose teaching over law, public service over profit, making a difference in kids' lives over making six figures. I drifted through the crowd like a ghost, people barely acknowledging my presence with quick, dismissive nods before immediately turning back to their conversations about Madison's achievements, the political connections she was making, the trajectory toward partner track that seemed inevitable. My mother, Patricia, swept past me holding a crystal wine glass that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget, air-kissed my cheek without making actual contact, and said, in that artificially bright tone she uses when she's performing for an audience, "Jessica, darling, don't just stand there looking so lost and overwhelmed. Mingle, network, it's a celebration of excellence. And there are very important people here tonight." "A celebration of what exactly?" I asked, forcing what I hoped looked like a genuine smile while my heart was sinking into my stomach. "I thought this was supposed to be my birthday party." Her eyes flashed with that warning look I'd known since childhood, the one that meant I was about to embarrass the family if I didn't immediately fall in line. "Don't start with your self-centered dramatics tonight," she whispered through gritted teeth while maintaining her perfect hostess smile. "We have senators here, federal judges, partners from the city's top law firms. This is about celebrating achievement and success. Surely you can put aside your petty jealousies for one evening." The words hit me like a physical slap. Petty jealousies on my own birthday? I wanted to ask her when exactly my birthday had become about celebrating someone else's career achievements, but I could see from her expression that any further questions would be met with the kind of public humiliation that had traumatized me throughout my childhood. I ended up gravitating toward the dessert table, the one corner of the massive dining room that nobody seemed particularly interested in occupying. There were elaborate French pastries that looked like they came from some Michelin-starred bakery, a multi-tiered tiramisu with gold leaf decoration, chocolate truffles arranged in perfect geometric patterns, and in the center, a massive sheet cake that looked like it belonged in a museum rather than a family celebration. I leaned closer to read the inscription, my heart hammering with a mixture of hope and dread. Maybe, despite everything else, they'd at least put my name on the birthday cake. Maybe there was still some acknowledgement that this was supposed to be about me. Instead, in flowing gold lettering that matched the banner outside, it simply read, "Excellence in all things, the Whitmore Legacy." No name, not mine. not anyone's. Even the birthday cake had decided I didn't exist. It was like they'd hired a professional baker to create a corporate celebration cake, something you'd see at a law firm's anniversary party, not a family birthday. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. This wasn't my birthday party at all. This was Madison's career celebration party, scheduled on my birthday, in my childhood home, with my family, celebrating everything I wasn't. The timing wasn't a coincidence. It was a deliberate choice, a way to make sure I understood exactly where I ranked in the family hierarchy. I tried to catch my father Robert's eye from across the room. He was standing with 4 of his law partners from Whitmore and Associates, the firm that bore our family name, the firm I'd never been invited to join despite having graduated summa cum laude from college. He was holding court with his preferred 30-year-old Macallan Scotch, discussing what sounded like a major corporate merger case they'd just won. When he finally noticed me staring at him, he gave me that perfunctory nod, the kind you give to a server who's just refilled your water glass, or to an acquaintance you vaguely recognize but can't quite place. A nod that said, "Yes, I acknowledge your physical presence in this space. Now please go find somewhere else to be invisible." For a moment, I tried to convince myself this was all just a massive misunderstanding. Maybe they wanted to do something sophisticated, something that celebrated the family's achievements as a whole rather than just me. Maybe this was their way of being diplomatic, of including Madison in my birthday celebration, since she'd just received this big promotion. Maybe I was being too sensitive, too self-centered, too focused on traditional birthday expectations. That desperate illusion shattered completely when Dr. Elizabeth Harrison, Madison's mentor from Columbia Law School and currently a sitting federal judge, tapped me on the shoulder with the kind of condescending smile that wealthy people perfect in finishing school. "You must be Madison's older sister," she said with that tone of voice that immediately established hierarchy. "Jessica, isn't it? The elementary school teacher? You must be so incredibly proud of Madison tonight. This senior associate position at her age, with her billable hours and client retention rate. It's simply unprecedented in the firm's 150-year history. She's being fast-tracked for partnership before she turns 35. Remarkable achievement for such a young woman." The words felt like small knives. Each one reminded me of everything I wasn't. Not a lawyer, not making 6 figures, just a teacher hoping for tenure someday. I was just the other daughter, the one who chose a career that helped children learn to read instead of helping corporations avoid taxes. "Right, very proud," I managed to say, my voice catching slightly as I swallowed all the words I really wanted to say. Words like, "This is supposed to be my birthday party," and "Why are you talking to me like I'm some distant relative instead of the guest of honor?" And "When did my family celebration become Madison's professional networking event?" That's when the first camera flash went off. I turned instinctively toward the light, only to realize I was standing completely alone by the punch bowl while Madison posed with a group of admirers by the grand fireplace. The photographer, apparently they'd hired a professional photographer for my birthday party, was capturing what would undoubtedly become another perfect family moment, with me as an accidental background figure in my own celebration. More flashes followed. Madison with the federal judges, Madison with my parents, Madison with her law school friends, Madison cutting into what I now realized was a second cake, her actual celebration cake, with her name written in elegant script. I stood there watching my own birthday party transform into Madison's professional photo shoot, and I realized that every single one of these photos would live forever in our family's narrative, documenting this night as Madison's triumph rather than my birthday. The formal toast began around 9:30. Madison's best friend from law school, Connor Pemberton, whose father happened to be a senior partner at another prestigious firm, called for everyone's attention with the kind of authoritative voice that comes from a lifetime of assuming people will listen. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, raising a crystal champagne flute that caught the light from the chandelier. "If I could have your attention for just a moment. Tonight, we're here to recognize something truly special, the kind of excellence and dedication that defines not just individual achievement, but family legacy. And of course, we're here to celebrate our absolutely brilliant Madison, who represents the very best of what the next generation of legal professionals can accomplish." The room fell silent except for the gentle clink of glasses and the soft rustle of expensive fabric. As 75 people turned their attention to the front of the room, Madison stepped forward with that perfectly practiced humility she'd mastered since childhood, the modest wave, the gracious smile, the way she tilted her head just so to convey both confidence and appropriate deference to her elders. My fingers clenched around my wine glass as the applause erupted around me. This was it. This was the moment when anyone, would remember that this was supposed to be my birthday party. Someone would mention my name, acknowledge my presence, maybe even share a memory or two about the little girl who used to blow out candles in this very room. Instead, Connor continued, Madison's achievements speak for themselves. Of course. Youngest senior associate in the firm's history, record-breaking billable hours, client satisfaction ratings that have actually impressed the managing partners. But what we're really celebrating tonight is something deeper. The continuation of a family tradition of excellence that spans generations. Something inside me snapped. Maybe it was the wine. Maybe it was 32 years of swallowing my voice. Maybe it was the accumulation of every slight and dismissal and erasure I'd endured in this house. But I found myself setting down my glass and walking toward the front of the room, my heart hammering against my ribs like it was trying to escape my chest. The conversations began to die down as people noticed me moving through the crowd. I could feel their eyes on me, could sense the shift in energy from celebration to something more uncomfortable. My mother's face went pale as she realized what was happening. Madison's perfect smile flickered for just a moment. "If I could just say something," I began, my voice steadier than I felt, loud enough to carry across the room, but not quite shouting. Since this is supposed to be my birthday party, I thought maybe I could share a few words about what birthdays mean to me, about family, about the people who shape our lives and support our dreams. I never got to finish that sentence. My father materialized beside me like a security guard responding to a threat, smoothly taking control of the situation with the kind of authority that comes from 40 years of commanding courtrooms and intimidating opposing counsel. "Let's keep the focus where it belongs tonight, shall we?" he said, placing what felt like a warning hand on my shoulder with just enough pressure to make his point clear. His voice carried that tone of professional dismissal that had silenced countless lawyers and witnesses over the decades. This is Madison's moment to shine, and we're all here to celebrate her remarkable achievements. I'm sure Jessica understands the importance of recognizing true excellence when we see it. The room actually applauded. 75 successful, educated, sophisticated people actually applauded my father for silencing me at my own birthday party. They applauded him for putting me in my place, for reminding me that I was just the supporting cast in Madison's story, for making it clear that my voice didn't matter in this space. I stood there, heat creeping up my neck like liquid fire. The humiliation was so intense I was sure everyone could see it radiating from my skin. 75 people had just watched my father silence me at my own birthday party. The shame was physical, tangible. Like wearing clothes soaked in gasoline while someone held a lit match nearby. I didn't cry. I'd learned long ago that tears only made things worse in my family, that any display of emotion would be dismissed as proof that I was too sensitive, too dramatic, too unstable to deserve respect. I didn't shout or cause a scene or storm out dramatically. I just stood there for a moment, looking around at all these people who were staring at me with expressions ranging from pity to embarrassment to outright contempt. Then I walked back to my corner of the room, each step feeling heavier than the last, like I was walking through quicksand while everyone watched. The party continued around me as if nothing had happened. Madison graciously accepted congratulations. My parents resumed their hosting duties, and the conversations picked up where they'd left off. I became invisible again, which was apparently exactly how everyone preferred it. I stayed for exactly 23 more minutes. I know because I kept checking my phone, counting down until I could escape without it being completely obvious that I was fleeing my own birthday celebration. I made forced small talk with 2 distant cousins who asked about my little teaching job, with the kind of tone people use when discussing charity work or community service. Something nice and noble, but ultimately unimportant. "Oh, how sweet," one of them said when I mentioned my 4th grade class. "It must be so rewarding, working with children. Not everyone is cut out for the real professional world. But teaching is such important work, very admirable for someone who wants to make a difference on a smaller scale." The condescension was breathtaking in its casual cruelty. These were people who'd watched me grow up, who'd attended my college graduation, who'd known me for decades. And they were talking to me like I was a quaint little charity case who'd chosen a cute hobby instead of a real career. Finally, when I couldn't take another second of smiling and nodding and pretending this was normal, I slipped out through the side door that led to the garden. The October air bit at my cheeks, sharp and clean compared to the suffocating atmosphere inside. I could still hear the laughter, the clinking of glasses, the sounds of celebration that had nothing to do with me echoing through the French doors. I stood there in the garden where I'd played as a child, looking up at the stars and trying to process what had just happened. I had come home hoping to feel like I belonged somewhere, hoping that maybe my family had finally decided to include me in their world of success and achievement. Instead, I had been publicly humiliated, dismissed, and erased at my own birthday party. But something had shifted inside me during those 23 minutes of public humiliation. For the first time in my life, the fog of confusion and self-doubt was starting to clear. I wasn't wondering anymore if I had misunderstood the situation, if I was being too sensitive, if this was somehow normal family dynamics that I just couldn't appreciate properly. I had been erased, intentionally, systematically. And tonight had been the public ceremony to make it official. The drive home felt like traveling between 2 different universes. Behind me, golden light and celebration. Ahead of me, my modest apartment in Queens. But for the first time, I knew which world was real. Behind me, the golden glow of my childhood home was disappearing in the rearview mirror, along with the sounds of 75 people celebrating everything I would never be. Ahead of me stretched the familiar route through Queens, past the 24-hour laundromats, the corner bodegas, the apartment buildings where people like me lived paycheck to paycheck while dreaming of something better. I kept the radio off, letting the silence fill the Honda like water filling a sinking ship. Every red light gave me another moment to replay what had just happened. The banner with Madison's name, the cake that ignored my existence, my father silencing me in front of all those powerful people, the applause that followed. Each memory felt like a fresh wound, but underneath the pain, something else was growing. A cold, crystalline clarity that I'd never experienced before. By the time I pulled into the parking lot of Maple Grove Apartments, a modest complex that was clean and safe but definitely not impressive, I realized I wasn't crying. I wasn't even angry anymore. I was something much more dangerous. I was done making excuses for them. I climbed the 3 flights to apartment 3B, my heels echoing in the empty stairwell that smelled like industrial cleaning products and someone's leftover Chinese takeout. The building wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. Every month, I wrote that rent check with money I'd earned teaching 9-year-olds how to read and write and think critically about the world around them. It might not have been prestigious work in my family's eyes, but it was honest work that made a real difference in real lives. My apartment was exactly 750 square feet of everything my family would consider beneath them. Secondhand furniture I'd painted myself, books from garage sales and library discards, art from local artists whose names wouldn't impress anyone at a cocktail party. But for the first time all evening, I could breathe. For the first time in hours. I wasn't performing or apologizing or trying to make myself smaller to fit into spaces that had never been meant for me. I sat on the edge of my bed, still wearing that navy blue dress from Target, the one I'd thought would help me fit in with their world of designer everything. Now it felt like a costume from a play I never wanted to audition for again. As I reached to unzip it, I noticed something I'd missed when I walked in. An envelope had been slipped under my front door sometime during the evening. The envelope was expensive, thick cream paper, the kind used for wedding invitations or legal documents, no return address, no postmark. Just my name written in handwriting I didn't recognize. Jessica Marie Whitmore in elegant script that suggested education and breeding. Inside were 3 items that would change the trajectory of my entire life. First, a single photograph, grainy and clearly taken with a phone camera through a window. But the faces were unmistakable. My mother, Patricia, and Madison, standing in what I recognized as our family's gourmet kitchen, laughing as they worked on something together. They were decorating cakes, not the elegant sheet cake from tonight's party, but 2 smaller cakes that looked homemade. Patricia was holding what appeared to be a children's birthday cake with crude, deliberately childish decorations. Madison was adding what looked like intentionally messy frosting to another cake. But what stopped my heart was their expressions. These weren't the faces of people preparing a loving family celebration. These were the faces of people planning a cruel joke. Their laughter captured mid-moment as they created what I now realized were mock birthday cakes designed to humiliate me. The second item was a printed email chain, dated 3 weeks before my birthday. The header showed it was between Madison's work email and someone identified only as party coordinator. But the content was devastating. Madison, we need this to look like a birthday party but feel like a career celebration. Jessica needs to understand where she stands in the family hierarchy without us having to say it directly. Can you handle the banner situation? Party coordinator, absolutely. We'll do celebrating our shining star with your name. For the cake, I suggest something neutral that doesn't acknowledge her specifically. Family excellence, perhaps? Madison. Perfect. And make sure the guest list is entirely my professional contacts plus family. I want her to feel like she doesn't belong in the room, because she doesn't. The third item was a handwritten note on the same expensive paper. Some families celebrate by erasing people. Some people fight back by exposing the truth. Your grandmother, Sarah, left you more than they told you. Safety Deposit Box, 847, First National Bank of Westchester. The key is taped under the loose floorboard in your childhood bedroom closet. She knew this day would come. A friend who sees everything. My hands were shaking as I read the note again. Grandmother Sarah had died 8 years ago, and I'd been told there was no inheritance, that her estate had been entirely consumed by medical bills and end-of-life care expenses. My parents had handled everything, claiming they were protecting me from the burden of dealing with legal complications. But someone, this mysterious friend who apparently had access to both my family's private conversations and my grandmother's secret plans, was telling me that wasn't true. Someone had been watching my family systematically destroy me, and they'd finally decided to arm me with the weapons I needed to fight back. I stared at those 3 pieces of evidence until my eyes burned. The photograph showing the premeditation, the emails proving the conspiracy, the note revealing that my grandmother had apparently anticipated this betrayal and prepared for it. This wasn't a family dinner that had gotten out of hand. This wasn't favoritism or complicated family dynamics or misunderstandings that could be resolved with better communication. This was a calculated campaign to erase me from my own family, orchestrated by the people who were supposed to love me most. I looked around my small apartment, at the bookshelf full of young adult novels I used in my classroom, at the desk where I graded papers and planned lessons that would help kids discover their own potential, at the life I'd built completely separate from their world of power and prestige. For years, I'd felt ashamed of this modest existence, like it was proof that I wasn't successful enough to deserve their respect. But sitting there with that evidence in my hands, I realized something that would have terrified me just hours earlier. I didn't want their respect anymore. I wanted something much more powerful. I wanted justice. The next morning arrived gray and cold, matching my mood perfectly. I'd barely slept, my mind racing through implications and possibilities and the growing certainty that my entire family history was built on lies. By 6 a.m., I was dressed and driving back to Westchester, this time not as the hopeful daughter seeking acceptance, but as an investigator gathering evidence. The house looked different in daylight, smaller somehow, less intimidating. The remnants of last night's party were still visible, caterers' vans in the driveway, boxes of rental equipment being loaded up, wilted flowers from the elaborate arrangements. It looked like the aftermath of any successful corporate event, which I now realized was exactly what it had been. I used my old key, the one they'd never bothered to ask for back, and slipped inside through the mudroom. The house was quiet. My parents were probably sleeping off their triumph, and Madison had likely returned to her Manhattan apartment to bask in the afterglow of her professional celebration. My childhood bedroom was exactly as I'd left it years ago, a museum of the daughter they'd stopped acknowledging. The closet still smelled like the cedar sachets my mother had placed there to protect clothes I'd outgrown. In the back corner, behind boxes of childhood memorabilia, I found the loose floorboard my mysterious correspondent had mentioned. The key was exactly where they'd said it would be, a small brass key taped to the underside of the board, along with a folded paper in my grandmother's distinctive handwriting for Jessica, when she's ready to learn the truth about who she really is and what she really deserves. With all my love, Grandma Sarah. The safety deposit box at First National Bank of Westchester contained documents that rewrote my understanding of everything. My grandmother hadn't died leaving nothing. She died leaving everything to me. The original will, notarized and legally binding, named me as the sole beneficiary of her estate, the family home, the one I'd just fled from. Her investment portfolio worth $1.8 million, and a detailed letter explaining why she'd made these choices. My dearest Jessica, the letter began. If you're reading this, it means Patricia and Robert have done exactly what I feared they would do. They've tried to erase you from the family story to make room for Madison's ambitions. I've watched them favor her since childhood, and I've seen how they treat your kindness as weakness, your empathy as failure, your dedication to teaching as a lack of proper ambition. But I see who you really are. You're the granddaughter who spent summers reading to me when I was sick. You're the one who chose a career that helps children discover their potential instead of one that just makes money. You're the one who calls on holidays and remembers birthdays and asks about my health because you genuinely care, not because you're managing an inheritance strategy. The house should be yours. The money should be yours. But more importantly, the truth should be yours. I've left additional evidence in this box, recordings, documents, proof of what they've done to steal your birthright. Use it wisely, but use it. Don't let them erase you from your own story. The additional evidence was devastating. Bank records showing that my parents had fraudulently transferred ownership of the house and the investment accounts into their names, then subsequently gifted everything to Madison. Recordings. My grandmother had apparently been more tech-savvy than anyone realized, of family conversations where they discussed their Jessica problem and strategies for managing my expectations downward. In one particularly damning recording from 6 months before my grandmother's death, I heard my mother's voice saying, "Sarah's far too sentimental about Jessica. All that money and property should go to Madison. She'll actually do something worthwhile with it. Jessica will just waste it on some idealistic nonsense like funding her classroom or donating to charity. Madison understands investment and legacy building." My father's response was even worse. "Once Sarah's gone, we'll handle the estate transition. Jessica never needs to know what she was supposed to inherit. We'll tell her there were debts, medical expenses, whatever. She's too trusting to question it, and too financially naive to investigate." They'd stolen my inheritance and convinced me to be grateful. Grateful for letting me remain part of the family that was built on money that was legally mine. They'd taken the house my grandmother wanted me to have and turned it into the stage for my public humiliation. They'd used my trust against me, my love for them as a weapon to keep me compliant while they systematically erased me from my own legacy. But the most shocking discovery was a folder labeled Madison's Future, a detailed plan they developed for advancing her career using my stolen inheritance. The money wasn't just sitting in accounts. It was actively being used to fund her law school loans, her Manhattan apartment, her designer wardrobe, her networking events, even contributions to political campaigns that would eventually benefit her career trajectory. Every opportunity Madison had received, every advantage she'd been given, every connection that had smoothed her path to success, it had all been funded with money that was legally mine. She wasn't just the favored daughter. She was the beneficiary of an elaborate fraud that had been ongoing for 8 years. I sat in that sterile bank vault, surrounded by the evidence of my family's betrayal, and felt something I'd never experienced before. Pure, crystalline rage, not the hot, impulsive anger of a moment, but the cold, calculating fury of someone who finally understands exactly how they have been manipulated and exactly what they need to do about it. I made copies of everything: the will, the bank records, the recordings, the emails, my grandmother's letter. I placed the originals back in the safety deposit box and walked out of that bank carrying enough evidence to destroy my family's carefully constructed narrative of success and legitimacy. But first, I needed to understand the full scope of what they'd done. I needed to see how deep this conspiracy went and how many other lies they'd built their lives on. And I needed to do something that would force them to face the truth about who they really were and what they'd stolen from the granddaughter who'd loved them unconditionally. The drive back to my apartment felt different this time. I wasn't fleeing in humiliation. I was retreating to plan my counterattack. They'd spent years teaching me to be invisible, to stay quiet, to accept whatever scraps of affection they were willing to offer. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd underestimated what happens when you push a teacher too far. Because teachers don't just educate children. We also know how to research, how to gather evidence, how to present facts in ways that are impossible to ignore or dismiss. And most importantly, we know that the truth, once revealed, has the power to change everything. As I pulled into my apartment complex, I was already planning my next moves. The evidence was just the beginning. Now I needed to decide how to use it, not just to reclaim what was mine, but to make sure they could never do this to anyone else again. They'd celebrated erasing me from the family story. Now it was time for them to learn what happens when the erased person starts writing her own ending. The war they'd declared at my birthday party was about to become very real, and they had no idea what was coming. The Monday morning after my birthday massacre, I did something I'd never done in my 7 years of teaching. I called in sick when I wasn't actually sick. But I wasn't lying. I was sick. Sick of being invisible. Sick of accepting crumbs. Sick of letting other people write the story of my life while I sat quietly in the corner hoping for scraps of approval, instead of standing in front of my 4th grade classroom teaching kids about the Revolutionary War. I was sitting in the law office of Margaret Chen, Esquire, an attorney I'd found through 3 hours of research on lawyers who specialized in estate fraud and family financial crimes. Margaret's office in downtown Manhattan was nothing like my father's mahogany-paneled shrine to old money power. Her space was modern, efficient, and decorated with photos of ordinary people who'd won extraordinary battles against much more powerful opponents. Mrs. Whitmore, Margaret said, reviewing the mountain of evidence I'd spread across her conference table. In 23 years of practicing law, I've rarely seen such a clear-cut case of estate fraud combined with such extensive documentation of the crime. Your grandmother was remarkably thorough in protecting your interests. She held up the original will, examining the notarization and signatures with the kind of attention that comes from handling millions of dollars in disputed inheritances. This will is ironclad. The subsequent transfer of assets to your parents and then to your sister constitutes theft of property that legally belonged to you. We're talking about felony charges here, federal crimes that could result in significant prison time for all parties involved. The words hit me like electricity. Prison time. Federal crimes. For 8 years, I'd been living in a modest apartment, stretching my teacher's salary to cover basic expenses, while my family had been living off money that was legally mine. Madison's Manhattan lifestyle, her designer clothes, her ability to take unpaid internships that led to prestigious positions, all of it funded by my stolen inheritance. But here's what makes this case truly extraordinary, Margaret continued, pulling up the audio recordings on her laptop. Your grandmother didn't just document the financial crimes. She documented the conspiracy itself. Listen to this conversation from May 15th, 2019. The recording quality was surprisingly clear. My grandmother had apparently hidden a digital recorder in her bedroom during one of my parents' visits. Patricia's voice. Mother, you need to be realistic about Jessica's future. She's 31 years old, still teaching elementary school, living in that tiny apartment in Queens. She clearly doesn't have the ambition or sophistication to handle serious wealth responsibly. Robert's voice. Sarah, we've built a comprehensive plan for Madison's career trajectory. The connections we're developing, the investments we're making in her future. This is generational wealth building. Jessica would just, I don't know, probably donate it all to some children's literacy program or something equally wasteful. Sarah's voice, weaker but determined. That money and property are meant for Jessica. She's the one who comes to visit me, who remembers my birthday, who actually cares about me as a person rather than just an inheritance opportunity. Patricia, with obvious irritation. Mother, sentiment doesn't build family legacies. Madison is going to be a federal judge someday, maybe attorney general. She's going to move in circles where this family's reputation actually matters. Jessica is, well, she's sweet, but she's never going to amount to anything significant. The recording continued for another 20 minutes, documenting in painful detail how my parents systematically planned to steal my inheritance while convincing me to be grateful for their occasional attention. They discussed legal strategies for transferring assets, ways to minimize my involvement in estate planning, and methods for managing my expectations so I wouldn't question what happened after my grandmother died. But the most devastating part came near the end, when my father said, "The beauty of this approach is that Jessica will never suspect anything. She's so desperate for family approval that she'll accept whatever story we tell her. We could probably convince her that she owes us money for raising her, and she'd find a way to pay it." Their laughter on that recording, casual, dismissive laughter at my expense, felt like being stabbed with ice picks. These people had raised me, claimed to love me, celebrated holidays with me, all while planning to systematically steal everything my grandmother had wanted me to have. Margaret clicked off the recording and leaned back in her chair. "Jessica, I need you to understand something. This isn't just about money or property. What your family did to you constitutes a form of financial abuse that destroyed your opportunities for nearly a decade. While they were building wealth and connections with your inheritance, you were struggling to pay rent and student loans that should have been cleared years ago." She pulled out a calculator and started running numbers. Let's talk about the actual scope of this theft. The original inheritance was $1.8 million plus the property, valued at $800,000 in 2016, invested conservatively over 8 years. You should currently be worth approximately $3.2 million. Instead, you're living paycheck to paycheck while Madison enjoys a lifestyle funded entirely by money that belongs to you. $3.2 million. I stared at those numbers, trying to process what they meant. I could have paid off my student loans immediately. I could have bought a house, traveled, maybe even started my own school or literacy foundation. Instead, I'd spent 8 years worrying about grocery budgets while Madison lived in a luxury Manhattan apartment that I had unknowingly paid for. "What are my options?" I asked, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. Margaret smiled, the kind of smile that probably made opposing counsel very nervous. "You have several options, and they're all devastating for your family. Option 1, we file criminal charges for estate fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. Federal prosecutors love cases this well documented, especially when they involve wealthy defendants who thought they were too smart to get caught." She held up a finger. "Option 2, we file a civil lawsuit demanding return of all assets, plus damages, interest, and punitive awards. Given the clear evidence of malicious intent, we could probably triple the current value of the estate." Another finger. "Option 3, we do both simultaneously, criminal charges to establish their guilt, civil litigation to recover your assets and punish them financially. This approach tends to get defendants' attention very quickly." She leaned forward, her expression becoming more serious. "But Jessica, I need you to understand that any of these options will destroy your family's reputation permanently. Your father's law firm will face ethics investigations. Madison's career prospects will be severely damaged. Your parents could face significant prison time. Once we pull this trigger, there's no going back to family dinners and birthday parties." The irony wasn't lost on me. After what they'd put me through at my own birthday party, the idea of never attending another family gathering sounded like a gift rather than a punishment. "There's something else you need to know," Margaret continued, pulling out another document. "I did some additional research on your sister's career trajectory, that senior associate position she just received. It's at a firm that manages several investment accounts connected to your stolen inheritance. Madison hasn't just been benefiting from your money. She's been actively involved in managing and investing it. She knew exactly where that money came from. The betrayal went even deeper than I'd imagined. Madison hadn't just passively accepted benefits from my stolen inheritance. She'd been actively participating in the financial management of money she knew was legally mine. Every congratulation she'd received for her professional success, every award for her legal acumen, every networking connection she'd made, all of it built on a foundation of theft and fraud. "I want option 3, I said without hesitation. "Criminal charges and civil litigation. All of it." Margaret nodded approvingly. "I was hoping you'd say that, but before we file anything, I think we should give them one opportunity to resolve this privately. It's standard practice, and it sometimes produces interesting results when defendants realize how much evidence exists against them." She drafted a letter that was a masterpiece of legal intimidation. Formal notification of my knowledge of the estate fraud, detailed documentation of the evidence against them, and a demand for complete restitution within 30 days or face both criminal and civil proceedings. The letter was professionally courteous and absolutely terrifying in its implications. "We'll send this certified mail to your parents' home address and to Madison's firm," Margaret explained. "They'll have 72 hours to contact us to discuss resolution before we proceed with filing charges." That evening, I sat in my small apartment holding copies of the legal documents that would change everything. For the first time in my adult life, I felt powerful. Not because I was seeking revenge, though I'd be lying if I said the prospect didn't have some appeal, but because I was finally standing up for myself, with the same determination I brought to protecting my students from bullies. The response came faster than Margaret had predicted. 18 hours after the letters were delivered, my phone rang with a call from my father's law firm. "Jessica." Robert's voice was strained, careful, the tone of someone who just realized they'd made a catastrophic mistake. "I think we need to have a family meeting. There seems to be some misunderstanding about your grandmother's estate." Misunderstanding. As if 8 years of systematic theft could be dismissed as a simple miscommunication. "There's no misunderstanding, Dad." The childhood name felt foreign in my mouth. "There's evidence, recordings, documents, federal crimes that you, Mom, and Madison committed together." The silence on the other end stretched for nearly 30 seconds. When he spoke again, his voice had changed completely. This was Robert Whitmore, the defense attorney, calculating damage control strategies. "Perhaps we could resolve this as a family, without involving outside parties. I'm sure we can come to an arrangement that works for everyone." "The arrangement that works for me," I said, feeling stronger with every word, "is getting back everything you stole, plus interest, plus damages for the 8 years of financial hardship you caused me while you were living off my inheritance. Oh, and public acknowledgement of what you did. Jessica, be reasonable. Think about what this would do to the family reputation, to Madison's career, to the family that celebrated erasing me at my own birthday party?" I interrupted. "To Madison's career that was built entirely on money stolen from me? To the reputation you built on fraud and theft? I've thought about all of that. Dad, I've thought about it very carefully." I hung up before he could respond. Within an hour, my phone was buzzing with calls from my mother, text messages from Madison, voicemails from various relatives who'd apparently been recruited for damage control. I ignored them all. The next call came from Margaret. "Jessica, I just received a very interesting phone call from Morrison, Whitney and Associates, your father's firm. They want to schedule a settlement conference for this Friday. They're clearly panicking." Friday arrived gray and rainy. Perfect weather for destroying a family's reputation. The conference room at Margaret's office felt like a courtroom where I was about to be both prosecutor and witness. My parents arrived looking like they'd aged 5 years in 5 days. Madison came straight from court, still wearing her power suit, but looking significantly less powerful than usual. They'd brought their own attorney, David Morrison, senior partner at my father's firm and family friend for over 20 years. The settlement meeting lasted 6 hours and revealed just how deep their financial crimes had gone. It wasn't just my inheritance they'd stolen. They'd also been illegally accessing and managing my grandmother's pension accounts, Social Security benefits, and even some investments I'd never heard of. The total value of stolen assets had grown to over $4 million. But the most shocking revelation came when Madison finally spoke. 3 hours into the meeting. I want everyone to know that I never wanted any of this. I told them years ago that Jessica should get Grandma's inheritance, but they said the family needed to think strategically about wealth building and legacy planning. Even in confession, she was trying to minimize her responsibility and position herself as another victim of our parents' manipulation. But Margaret had documentation showing Madison's active involvement in investment decisions and her legal work on transferring assets. She hadn't been a passive beneficiary. She'd been a full partner in the conspiracy. "Here's what's going to happen," Margaret announced after reviewing all the financial documentation, full restitution of the original inheritance plus 8 years of investment growth. That's $3.2 million, plus a penalty of $800,000 for the deliberate nature of the fraud, plus Jessica's legal fees, plus a public statement acknowledging what you did. My father's face went white. That would bankrupt us. We'd lose the house, the firm, everything. You should have thought about that before you stole Jessica's inheritance, Margaret replied coolly. These are the consequences of committing federal crimes against your own daughter. The negotiation continued for another 3 hours, but the outcome was never in doubt. They had no legal defense for what they'd done, and the evidence was overwhelming. In the end, they agreed to full financial restitution, public acknowledgement of the theft, and a statement from Madison admitting her role in the conspiracy. But I had one more requirement that I hadn't mentioned to Margaret. I want them to publicly apologize at the next family gathering, the Christmas party that you host every year, Dad. I want everyone who was at my birthday party to hear exactly what you did and why you did it. The Christmas party had always been the social event of my father's year. Judges, politicians, wealthy clients, all the people whose opinions mattered in his world. The idea of publicly confessing to financial crimes in front of that audience was clearly devastating to him. "Jessica," my mother spoke for the first time in hours, "surely we can handle this privately. Think about what this will do to the family." "I am thinking about the family, Mom," I replied. "I'm thinking about the family member you've been stealing from and humiliating for years. I'm thinking about the granddaughter who loved you unconditionally while you were planning to rob her blind. I'm thinking about all the family gatherings where you made me feel worthless while you were literally living off money that belonged to me." She started crying then, not the elegant tears of someone genuinely remorseful, but the desperate tears of someone facing consequences for the first time in her life. 3 weeks later, I sat in the back of the same church hall where I'd been humiliated at my birthday party, watching my father stand at the front of the room facing 200 guests who'd come expecting a festive Christmas celebration. Instead, they were about to witness the complete destruction of the Whitmore family's carefully constructed reputation. "Ladies and gentlemen," Robert began, his voice shaking slightly, "I need to make an announcement that will come as a shock to many of you. For the past 8 years, my wife, my daughter, Madison, and I have been guilty of estate fraud involving the inheritance that rightfully belonged to my daughter Jessica." The room fell completely silent. You could hear the heating system cycling on. the distant sound of traffic outside, the shift of expensive fabric as 200 people collectively held their breath. He continued, reading from the statement Margaret had crafted. We fraudulently transferred $1. $8 million plus property worth $800,000 from Jessica's inheritance to our own accounts, then used those funds to finance Madison's education, career, and lifestyle while Jessica struggled financially. We did this knowingly, deliberately, and in direct violation of the deceased's wishes and state and federal law. The confession continued for another 10 minutes, detailing exactly how they'd executed the fraud, how they'd covered it up, and how they'd used my trust and love against me to prevent me from discovering the truth. By the time he finished, several people had quietly left, others were whispering in shock, and the social fabric of my father's professional world was unraveling in real time. Madison was supposed to speak next, but she couldn't stop crying long enough to get through her prepared statement. My mother tried to salvage something by emphasizing their regret and desire to make amends. But the damage was complete and irreversible. I stood up then, for the first time commanding attention in that room, not because I was disrupting someone else's moment, but because I had earned the right to speak. 8 years ago, I said, my voice carrying clearly through the silent room. My grandmother died believing she had provided for my future. Instead, these people stole that future and used it to build success for someone else while convincing me I should be grateful for whatever scraps of affection they were willing to offer. I looked around the room at faces I'd known my entire life, some sympathetic, others shocked, many clearly calculating the social and professional implications of being associated with my family after this revelation. I'm not sharing this story because I want your pity or because I'm seeking revenge, I continued. I'm sharing it because silence protects abusers, and I'm done being silent. Some of you have children, grandchildren, people you claim to love. Remember this night the next time you're tempted to put financial gain ahead of family loyalty. Remember what happens when love becomes conditional on usefulness. The aftermath was swift and brutal. My father's law firm faced ethics investigations and lost several major clients within days. Madison was placed on administrative leave pending a review of her professional conduct. My parents were forced to sell their house and liquidate most of their assets to pay the restitution. But the most satisfying consequence was completely unexpected. Within a month of the Christmas party confession, 7 other people contacted Margaret Chen with evidence of similar financial abuse by family members. My story had given them the courage to speak up about their own experiences with inheritance theft and family financial crimes. I never returned to those family gatherings. I didn't need to anymore. I had reclaimed not just my inheritance, but something much more valuable, my voice, my dignity, and my understanding that love should never come with the price tag of silence. The money allowed me to start the Sarah Whitmore Foundation for Financial Literacy Education, a program that teaches young people how to protect themselves from financial abuse and inheritance fraud. Every child who learns to spot the warning signs, every family that has honest conversations about money and legacy, every person who refuses to stay silent about financial abuse, they're all part of my grandmother's true inheritance. The people who stole from me thought they were erasing my story. Instead, they gave me the most powerful story I could ever tell: how to survive family betrayal, how to find your voice when others try to silence you, and how to turn theft into justice. Because sometimes the biggest theft isn't money. It's trying to steal someone's worth. And that story is just beginning.